Welcome to another episode of Write Up, and today I'm joined by Robert Mosley. Hi, I am Elysium, and welcome to my channel. And welcome to you, Robert. How are you?
I'm doing good, thank you. It's good to be here.
So we met for the first time the other day, but I know that you've been hanging around on Twitter for a while, and you're fairly well acquainted with Andrew, aren't you?
Yeah, Andrew, Utopian, his Twitter account. We've interacted for I can't tell you how long, but fairly regular and constant interaction.
And did you meet each other because you both have a common interest of writing, or I'm just interested in how you got to know him in the first place?
I think both of us have a technical background, and so I think that was probably one of the original connections. And then, we've talked about writing and things like that pretty often. I don't know if he's ever read anything that I've written, but I read what he writes. He's very poetic in his writing and what he posts on Twitter, and so I've gotten a good hint of what he writes. But yeah, I think some of that technical background, being able to speak that common language helps a lot in building that interaction. We probably have a very similar sense of humor too, so our jokes.
So it's interesting that you mention having that technical background, because the craft of writing is very often associated with people who are entirely creative and live very creative lives. But actually, I don't think that that's true for either you or Andrew. So could you tell us a little bit about your background and what you do now, perhaps?
Okay. So I think you're absolutely correct. I'm not the traditional creative type. I'm very technical, very science and math heavy. In college, I got a physics degree. I've worked with data and in IT programming for most of my career. I think where my writing maybe originated from, I was a very industrious reader. So when I was in fourth grade, I remember our teacher had a bookworm reading contest where you got points for each book that you read. And I probably read twice as many books as anybody else in the class. And that really just kept going. I was in fifth and sixth grade. I read everything I could get my hands on. I was probably a little more socially awkward than most, but I read a lot. And I remember I bought like the complete works of Sherlock Holmes, and I read through, if not all of it, very close to all of it. My reading probably kept up like that very voraciously until middle school, seventh grade time frame. I still read a lot after that, but it probably eased off a little bit. Before that, I was probably reading a book or two a day, which is a lot to read, but
It's an
it helped me get an idea of, I particularly like mystery stories or thriller stories, and helped me get an idea at least how those structures worked, how its mystery took place. For me, there's a very big difference between a book I just can't put down and can't let go of, a book that loses my interest, a mystery that maybe it has a good story, but it doesn't have a good mystery. It loses me. And I get very frustrated if there's no way you could have known who the bad guy was until the very end when they accidentally stumble into them and discover who it is. Those sort of coincidences that come true. I like twists that are earned, like a protagonist that once again earns their discovery at the end of the story. And so especially when it comes to those mysteries, thrillers, I like the story to have a purpose other than to keep the reader reading. And I feel like I learned a lot of that through those reading those books when I was a kid, reading both adult and sort of YA type books.
I think that is absolutely the best way to learn about writing. It's to absorb, to read really quickly. I studied English literature and creative writing for my first degree. And I was reading a lot of books. It wasn't one a day. I have to admit, it wasn't quite that heavy, but I found it hard to get to. It was probably three a week, and it was tough going because it was relentless.
Yeah.
And I think had I had your appetite for words, then I probably would have sailed through it very calmly. As it happened, the only way I could get through it was with audiobooks, which at that time were on cassette. So I hope I'm not revealing too much, but there we go.
Yeah.
So yeah, but actually, I came out of that feeling like I had overdosed on literature, and yeah, I felt like I needed to regain balance, and so writing isn't something that I've picked up again since. Actually, I've kind of gone in other directions, but I'm very grateful for having that as a foundation for everything else that's come after it. And I think for me, I'm fascinated particularly with the grammar of language, the mechanics, what happens inside a sentence. And I can see that your fascination perhaps is for the mechanics of writing, but maybe in a broader sense. So how the structures work, the plot mechanics, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm not one to, I mean, I guess I am a little bit in life, a little formulaic, especially in my younger years. Like if you follow the formula, you're there. Probably as I've gotten older, I've strayed away from that a little bit. So I don't think I'm extremely formulaic in my writing, but I do care about the way that a story progresses, that each scene it adds something to the story. And I think that's a great thing until you finish a book like I did, and it was far too long. It became hard to remove stuff because you couldn't remove something without creating a gap in the story that then you had to seal through other means. So it's always two steps forward, one step back when I try to remove, because you got to take something away and then add it back in a shorter context.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you can take something out of a story and it's not missing in the story, then it doesn't belong in the story. And so I feel like there are a lot of books that have those types of things in them, and you've read 4 or 5 chapters and you learn that none of it was useful anyway, and it was just there. I don't know if filler is the right word, but I come away feeling like, man, I wasted my time with those.
Exactly. It's almost like the equivalent of the author just filling a few pages with selfies, and there's just no real content there.
I mean, I think there are certain readers that enjoy that kind of thing. Even just literary fiction. There's clearly there's a market for it, of a book that's more about the writing than maybe even the story. There needs to be a story, there needs to be a point, but I think some people just genuinely love the writing. And I mean, in that sense, I would probably be the minority where, yeah, I want good writing, but I care more about the story than the writing. I don't know if that makes me a bad author in that context or not, but yeah, that's just how I've always approached it. It's about the story first.
Yeah, I would say what you're describing probably is the recipe for a very good author, actually, because not only do you understand what a good book should have in it, but I know that you pay a very close attention to what's happening in the market. So yeah, because you're a bit of a data head. Now, Andrew tried to explain this a little bit to me the other day, but maybe you could tell us what it's all about in more detail. Would that be okay?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what you're referring to is I have a hashtag that I've used called pitch stats. And so this started from having pitch events like PitMad and a whole host of others that were out there. And I would see, I think I jumped into one and wrote a few pitches. And I think I typically get, a small pub like or something, but I never got an agent like. You saw a bunch of subjective advice written by people saying, oh, do this, do that, write it in this way. And I could never tell if that was valid advice or not. Sometimes people's advice would be a little bit contradictory. Sometimes it would say, this is absolutely how you do it. But I didn't know if that was really true or not. Being, sort of more scientific background, being someone who works with data a lot, I decided one PitMad, this was, September's last year, to write scripts to download every PitMad tweet and then to analyze them. And
wow.
So this is what I do this kind of stuff professionally. I work in data warehouses. I do a lot of data modeling, things like that. Had some spare time on my hands. So got the data in, pushed it to my favorite cloud data warehouse and modeled it, and then wrote a whole bunch of queries against it and got a bunch of results out. And so what I did is I started posting some of this stuff on Twitter. At first, I didn't expect anybody else to care. A lot of my data stuff I'm used to it being something that I enjoy. Very few other people enjoy.
Okay.
What I found is that the writing community really did appreciate it. And so it became something that I do pretty much with every single pitch event that comes out. If it's got a sizable interest in it, I do all that, identify what agents have liked what pitches, and give people statistics on what agents are looking for versus what they're not looking for, and how to get their attention, things like that.
Wow, that's phenomenal. And you've been doing all of this just in your spare time, and it's available to people for free?
Yeah, so if you go to Twitter and you look at the pitch, just search for pitch stats, the hashtag pitch stats, you'll find a lot of my posts out there. I did have one that I'd put together for a PitMad where it was just a long thread of a bunch of, just a bunch of summary information of everything that's out there. But what I've found is that agents are genuinely looking for diverse plays. So they're looking for own voices for people of color, authors. There's fantasy is a flooded market. There's a lot of pitching into that market. There's a lot of agents requesting from that market, but overall, it's a lot harder to get noticed in that market than something like murder mystery, where maybe there's fewer requests, maybe there's fewer authors, but there's far fewer authors, so a much higher percentage of pitches get liked. So there's things like that that you can identify. You can really see which genres are quote unquote dead because they never get any likes. And so you can see what's popular right now, what's not popular. And I feel like that helps people craft their marketing message. My book it's not quite a superhero book, but it has superhero elements in it.
Okay.
But it's very obvious that the superhero genre, while it's very popular in movies, is quote unquote dead in writing. And so I would be doing myself a disservice if I were to pitch it as superhero.
Okay.
Really, it's a thriller book. It's YA, coming of age type story, and so pitching it along those lines gives it a much better success than trying to pitch it as something that really nobody's looking for and would hurt it more than help it. And so those types of insights, I think, help people a lot. Another insight that really came out of it is it's very popular to suggest writing a block of text. You got to have your stakes in there. You got to have your tension and conflict, and it's like a mini query that you pitch. And those are by far the most popular pitches that you see. But the ones that get the most interest are people who put in a lot of emoticons, a lot of white space, bulleted lists. Those types of people have much higher percentage chances of getting agent likes than someone who just puts a block of text out there.
Wow, isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
Like, genuinely, you've uncovered some real secrets of the publishing world.
Yeah, and I think, for me, I got to see the data to find that. I think there's certain people that can write this stuff and go, well, of course, this is more eye-catching. It's got color and it's structured better and things like that. For me, I have to run the numbers and I have to see it come out on the other side. And then I'm able to understand, oh, this is how I should approach this pitch event.
Mm.
Understand
I,
this.
I was thinking to myself the other day about how the way that we interact with text has changed over the years, and not actually that many years at all. If you think about, kind of 20, 30 years ago, when we were used to reading stuff on paper and ingesting large blocks of text, it's just not that way anymore.
Yeah.
And when you're just scrolling through Twitter, for example, just having a really quick scroll, your eyes are more likely to be drawn to the white space. And
Mhm.
like you're saying, the emojis, the emoticons, and images, and bullet points. Because when you're scrolling quickly, that's what your brain is more likely to stop and to take in. So it does make sense to me.
Yeah.
Mm.
Um, Something else that I had looked into was trying to understand the correlation of agents liking a pitch with how popular the pitch was. So if it gets a lot of retweets or a lot of comments, um, and I think it's fairly obvious that the more retweets and more comments, the more likely it's going to get a like. But the real question I was asking is, because there's a lot of people who do retweet for retweet pitches, or hey, comment on all my stuff and I'll comment on all your stuff, that kind of thing, trying to get more visibility.
Mm.
Um, and so I did do a certain experiment where I tried to identify, maybe you could manufacture it, maybe not. And there did seem to be this natural ratio between comments and retweets that performed much better with agents. And to me, what that signified was that nobody could go out there and manufacture this sort of natural ratio. That ratio just comes from genuine viral interest in something. So as
Mm.
people see something and they retweet it, or some of them comment on it, it creates that ratio. And you could see that agents jumped on that certain ratio twice as much as they did even a high performing tweet that did really well with retweets, but maybe didn't do so well with comments, or vice versa. It did really well in comments, but not so great in retweets.
Mm-hmm.
It showed that manufacturing hype about your um, pitch, while I'm sure it's better than no hype at all,
Mm.
it really isn't the main focus. You need to focus on building a great pitch, than more so than just trying to get enough people to retweet your pitch. And it showed to me, I feel like, that agents weren't just looking for popular pitches; they were looking for quality pitches.
I was about to say that it's all about the quality. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's probably fair. So I'm interested to learn about your journey into writing and how you landed in your genre.
Okay. So, um, my genre is YA thriller. I don't know if it necessarily is YA long term for everything, as much as thriller, mystery. Those are the stories that I really enjoy. Those are the stories that I come up with, and that I play around with in my head. Um, but the one that I did write was YA thriller. I think that, once again, as a kid, those were the types of books that I read. I always wanted a book that had a lot of twists and turns and a real mystery to sort of figure out.
Mm.
And so when I started writing, I think that's what I wrote. My journey into writing, I think I had this story that started developing in my head probably over the course of several years.
Mm.
Um, I don't know if I had any intention to do anything with it, as much as I had just sort of pictured it. And I went through sort of a very difficult time in my life. I got divorced, and ended up in a situation where, I had kids part of the time, no kids other parts of the time. And so
Mm-hmm.
you go from a situation where, you have your family and everything all the time, to now half the time, you're just a single bachelor.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a lot of free time on your hands, but it's not, I wasn't the type of divorcee that all of a sudden hit the clubs or anything like that. That wasn't my oh. And so I wanted to get out of the house, but I didn't really have any single friends to do things with. And so I started going to coffee shops. And I didn't really drink coffee, so I learned to like coffee. I mean, that's what I'm drinking right now. So
You
I
never
picked
have it.
coffee drinking,
Yeah.
but I think it's that atmosphere where there's things going on, so there's noise, but
Mm.
it's not noise that is meant for me.
Hmm.
And so I was able to just sort of get this tunnel vision, and I just started writing. And what I started writing was a story that I had in my head. And started making it bigger and understanding the characters more and writing into it. One of my favorite authors as a high schooler was Charles Dickens. So
Wow.
I think some of my initial style was a little bit framed in that way. So very wordy
Excellent.
and almost some omniscient overtones that I had to sort of work out later to take it more to third person, deep POV. But um, anyway, that was how I approached it. And I had this story in my head of you write a little bit of what you know, but of this techie teen that it ends up saving the day, and he does it through the gadgets that he's built and just being obsessive. And so I wrote this character that my excuse for why this kid is like this is that his mother died the year before, and he turns to his projects to sort of distract his mind, and it's the only thing that keeps him away from dealing with his grief. And he is sort of avoiding his grief. He's more than sort of avoiding it. He's straight up avoiding his grief, and he's using his projects to get there. But he ends up in a situation where he has to save the day using his gadgets, and he kills someone by doing so. He saves someone's life, but he kills the antagonist, and
No.
that's the inciting event in the story. And he is unhappy with the answers that he sort of receives out of it all. The police are somewhat unhappy with the answers they get, but he's not very assured that the police are really on top of it and that they're going to solve the crime or
Hmm.
what happened going into this incident. And so he becomes sort of convinced that there's a conspiracy at play, and he takes his gadgets, and he's a bit of a hacker. Once again, you write what you know, and he goes out and he begins to investigate this. So he's out in the streets, he's crawling through corporate networks, he's confronting criminals, and he finds his way into this sort of tiered conspiracy, and that goes from sort of has ties to the Russian mafia, and then also all the way up to some of the rich elite in the city. And he has to uncover it all and bring it down. And the whole time, the police are looking over his shoulder. He's dealing with these bad guys, and he's dealing with his own grief. And so it
Oh,
becomes this journey through his grief as he learns who he is, what he's capable of. He's learning to confront the grief that he's been hiding from for all this time, while also still engaging in this obsessive behavior that keeps him distracted from it. But he can't avoid it as he goes through the process. And so at the end, I open it up for series potential. That's all I'll say. And but he's walked through all this. He's created this resolution. He's created this resolution in himself with his grief. He's dealt with a lot of that, and he's more confident in who he is as a person as he comes out of this. But yeah, the story, I call it Orion. My main character, his name is David Orion, and his favorite constellation, of course, is the Orion constellation. But he gets that because his mom's favorite constellation was the Orion constellation.
oh,
And when he was young and his mom was pointing it out to him, um, he thought it was their family name that she was referring to, that maybe their family owned the constellation. And then he realizes, it's spelled differently. But so that's the connection that I have through it all. And so, maybe as a fault, or too much to a fault, the name's sort of cryptic for the book, but that's where the story comes from and builds to. So
this is such an amazing story. I want to read it now. I mean, tell me it's available.
It unfortunately is not. So that my writing journey. So I wrote that story. I I didn't know anything about the industry at all. Literally, I just wrote it in coffee shops. And when I finished it, I was like, okay, what do I do with this now? I started researching how to get a book published. I learned you need to get an agent. And that started my journey towards trying to find an agent. I discovered that my book was far too long. It was about 16,000 words. And for a debut author in my space, it should be more like 85,000. I've trimmed it down. It's below 100,000 now, but still, I've definitely been told that it's too long still. I've got different elements in there that I think make it a little bit complicated in this time and age. Some people are very much against violence, and there's violence in this, gun violence. The main character kills someone. And while the community sort of views him as heroic for doing so, he doesn't view it as heroic, but that can still have some complications. It's set in the Midwest. He's dealing with some of his parents' faith and stuff internally, and so there's some spiritual aspects to it. So it's one of those things that I feel like has a lot of layers in it, and so it's probably not lighthearted enough for a debut in my area. But anyway, I haven't had a lot of success with querying it. And so I'm at that juncture right now where I'm sort of considering, I have another idea for another book that I think would be much more marketable, especially after everything that I've learned. And I've started writing parts of it, but I ask myself, is this really the type of writer I want to be? And as I write it. And so I think that's interesting that I'm asking myself that while I write it, because I almost feel like the answer would be no if you ask yourself this question. So this is a long-winded answer to say, maybe one day I'll self-publish, or maybe one day I'll try to use it as a second book to try to publish. I'll probably make that decision sometime by the end of this year as to whether or not I go on my own, which I'm scared of, or if I continue to try the traditional publishing game.
Yeah, I completely understand being in that position. I have been in a similar situation myself, and I just shelved it and thought this isn't the right time in my life to pursue it. But it was a very different situation. It was a factual book. But anyway, it's very difficult to say which is the right route, because having gone through the process of being rejected and rejected and rejected, you kind of think, I can take this, I can do this, I can do this. And then the more it comes at you, it's just hideous, isn't it? It's such an awful process to go through, to get beaten down and beaten down. And so I remember it feeling relentless. And I think a lot of people probably give up at that point, because it's not a pleasant process at all. There must be so many masterpieces out there that just haven't made it through the first hurdle.
Yeah. And I believe it. I'm not trying to say mine's a masterpiece at all, but I have gotten some of that feedback from agents that say it's very promising work. They think the pretense or the idea is really compelling, but they feel like they can't sell it, and they've passed on it. And so that's hard because for me, I'm happy. One reason why I'm going through the traditional process is because I want to make the best book I can. And I know I'm an outsider. I know I'm not experienced with this. And so I was hoping to get that sort of mentorship and that guidance in order to create the best book that I could. But when you hear that it's not the quality, it's the subject matter, then you realize, okay, this might not be the avenue for me. And so it comes down to, well, do I quit? That sounds like I'm a quitter, or if you don't view it as quitting, just redirecting, that just might be another path. I've spent, better part of 2 years trying to really learn the industry. Now I might need to shift gears and learn the self-publishing side. So,
well, I don't think that that's a bad thing. And I was thinking about what you were talking about earlier with your inspiration coming from Charles Dickens.
Yeah.
And just as a lot of writers have a journey which takes them into writing, I think that the journey into publishing is also just as valid. And I think I'm right in saying that David Copperfield? No, Charles Dickens. I'm not sure where that came from. Charles Dickens's journey into publishing. He was serialized, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Before actually becoming very successful and famous. And I think one of the wonderful things about being alive in this age is the scope of the technology that we have at our fingertips. So maybe self-publishing is the right route to go down. Maybe there's another avenue that that hasn't yet been explored to its fullest potential. I don't know. I'm just, kind of throwing ideas up.
Yeah. And, for me, I understand that I'm a unique kind of individual myself. My tastes and things that I like are a little bit unique as well. You don't have too many people that just decide, hey, I'm gonna get a Twitter API account and download thousands of tweets and analyze them. You have to be a little bit different in
You
order.
said that, not me, okay?
Yeah, you have to be a little different in order to even think that way. But so I understand if the book that I write maybe isn't for the mass public, but at the same time, I still really believe in it. I think that it's got an important story that's in there. And I'm getting a visitor, so you might see a dog head stick up here.
That would be lovely.
That's it. I feel like it's something that could do well, could speak to a lot of people. I've had some beta readers tell me that it really makes them think in different ways. And those are, to me, some of the better compliments that you're at. And the last chapter makes them angry. And so you like that. Not angry as in mad that they read the whole thing, but mad that I don't have the sequel finished. So those types of things get you excited when someone's like, I gotta have the next one as soon as you get this one done. And unfortunately, I've had to tell some of them, for a couple of years, it's not ready yet. But those types of things, I think sharing the story, improving the story, those are things that make me excited about getting it out there. Me personally, I know that I will always write because I've learned that it's a great way to process my emotions. And it's really interesting. I think a lot of people process their emotions through journaling, writing about what they're feeling. I just put my emotions into a character in a story, and it does help me at the end. So, if I end up in that kind of state or whatever, sometimes I just need to go to a coffee shop and sit down for a few hours and type some things out. And it helps me. I don't know if there's processing going on in the subconscious or whatever, but it does help me get through it and come out the other side. So
I can completely understand that. Okay, so just before we finish this interview, I need to ask you, where can we find more of you, more of your stuff, your Twitter, your blogs? I believe that there are some blogs out there. So yes, what would you like to share?
So my username on Twitter, that's probably where I'm most active, is @Frosley. So it's FROZLEY. I can explain where that name comes from in a bit, but I also have pitchstats.frosley.com. And that's where I blog a little bit on pitch stats. I only have it's a new blog. I've only got a couple of posts out there. I plan on getting more out there in the future. But that's all I have at this point. I do have a professional blog, which I won't share here. Nobody wants to read about governance and warehouses, I don't think. But if you do, feel free to DM me on Twitter and I'll share that with you. But yeah, those are probably the main areas where I do my writing. And I'm after talking with you and Andrew the other day, I'm hoping to get back into Scribble and maybe have a place for a couple short stories that I've written or something like that. That's one thing I thought.
That would be fantastic. We would absolutely love that.
Yeah.
Really would. Yeah, that would be amazing. So go on then. Before we finish, tell me about the
yeah. So I need to probably post a picture of it, but when I was in high school and college, I had a gigantic afro. And so I didn't like haircuts, and I just didn't get a haircut. I don't know if you can tell, but I have extremely curly hair, very curly hair. I try to keep it short to keep it manageable because it flips out very quickly as it starts to grow. But yes, so I naturally grow it into a very big afro.
Brilliant.
And so as a kid, people combined the word fro with Mosley and created Frosley. And so that was my name for a lot of years when I was in high school and college.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh, I absolutely love it. There is nothing like the genius of kids for coming up with amazing names.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, clearly it's stuck. I use it for a lot of my usernames. I got the domain name for it. So there is a guy out there named Greg Frosley that I've connected with, but I think he might be the only Frosley that exists. So yeah, that's it.
I like it a lot, definitely. Do you know what? You have been amazing to interview. I've really loved hearing about how your mind works and how your journey of writing and your story and how everything makes up this incredible picture. And I heartily wish you the very best success with your work, because it sounds like you are very skilled and have a lot to offer.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
It's been amazing talking to you, Robert. Thank you. Or should I call you Frosley?
Yeah, I'll respond to that. Thank you.
Okay. I think we're meeting up next week, so I will catch up with you then. Okay. And there is just enough time for me to thank you for liking, subscribing, and putting the alert notification on so that you never miss an episode. And don't forget, if you like this channel, don't tell me, tell your friends. I'll see you next time.